What happens when a rude customer mocks a cashier for his disability, only to discover he owns the store? This powerful story of karma, resilience, and redemption will leave you speechless. Watch how one man's quiet strength turns prejudice into a life-changing lesson.
The store hummed with the energy of a busy afternoon. Customers browsed shelves stacked with products, children tugged at their parents' hands, and the steady beeps of barcode scanners punctuated the low murmur of conversation. The atmosphere was one of organized chaos, with employees darting between aisles to restock items or assist customers. The large glass storefront let in streams of sunlight, illuminating the polished floors and carefully arranged displays. Behind the cash register stood Ethan Blake, a man in his mid-30s. Ethan had a lean frame and a quiet confidence about him. His short dark hair was neatly combed, and his warm brown eyes reflected both focus and kindness. What set him apart, though, was the prosthetic leg he moved with practiced ease, visible beneath the hem of his khakis. Despite this, Ethan worked tirelessly, his efficiency and professionalism standing out to anyone who cared to notice. Ethan's day was much like any other, managing the register, assisting with customer inquiries, and occasionally helping with inventory. He never let his physical limitations define him. Years of facing assumptions and judgments had forged a quiet resilience within him. He didn't speak much about the accident that had cost him his leg. Instead, he preferred to focus on the present, pouring his energy into his work. As Ethan carefully bagged items for an elderly customer, his attention to detail was evident. "Thank you, young man," the woman said with a smile. "You're always so helpful." Ethan returned her smile. "Just doing my job, ma, am. Have a great day." The exchange was brief but heartfelt, a reminder that Ethan's professionalism and kindness didn't go unnoticed, except by those who chose to overlook it. Near the entrance, the glass doors slid open, and Vanessa Sterling walked in. Dressed in a designer coat and heels that clicked against the tile floor, she exuded wealth and entitlement. Her sunglasses rested atop her perfectly styled blonde hair, and she carried an oversized handbag that screamed luxury. Vanessa was the type of person who expected the world to cater to her, her impatience often palpable to anyone who crossed her path. She scanned the store with a critical eye, her lips pursed in mild disdain. It wasn't that she needed anything in particular. Shopping for her was more about asserting control, a game of superiority where everyone else was just a piece on the board. Vanessa's gaze fell on Ethan, who was helping a young mother pack groceries at the checkout counter. His prosthetic leg caught her attention immediately. A faint smirk crossed her face, the kind that hinted at unspoken judgments. She sauntered toward the counter, her heels clicking louder as she approached. "Excuse me," Vanessa said sharply, cutting off the young mother mid-sentence. "Are you almost done here?" "I don't have all day." Ethan looked up, maintaining his calm demeanor. "I'll be with you in just a moment, Mom," he said politely, returning to the task at hand. Vanessa's eyes narrowed, her irritation growing. "Well, if you were a little faster, maybe you wouldn't keep people waiting." She glanced pointedly at his prosthetic leg, her smirk widening. Ethan didn't flinch, though her words stung. He had encountered this kind of behavior before and had learned to maintain his composure. "I'll be with you shortly," he repeated, his tone steady. When it was finally her turn, Vanessa dropped a handful of items on the counter with an air of impatience. Ethan scanned them efficiently, his movements precise despite the strain of her judgmental gaze. "Do they not have faster people working here?" Vanessa asked loudly, drawing glances from nearby customers. "I mean, I'm sure you're doing your best, but maybe this isn't the right job for you." Ethan paused briefly, then continued scanning her items. "I assure you, ma'am, I'm fully capable of handling this job." Vanessa laughed, the sound sharp and dismissive. "I don't doubt you're trying, but let's be honest. This can't be easy for someone like you." I mean, she gestured vaguely at his leg. The comment hung in the air, heavy with insult. Nearby shoppers froze, their expressions ranging from discomfort to quiet outrage. But Ethan didn't let her see him falter. He kept his focus on the task, his professionalism unwavering. Ethan finished scanning the last item and placed it carefully in a bag. He looked up at Vanessa, meeting her gaze with calm, steady eyes. "Your total is $47.85, he said evenly. Vanessa huffed, pulling out a sleek credit card and tossing it onto the counter. Ethan swiped it without comment, maintaining his composure even as Vanessa's smirk lingered. As he handed her the receipt, he said, "Thank you for your purchase. Have a great day." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Yeah, sure." She grabbed her bags and strutted toward the exit, leaving a trail of tension in her wake. As soon as Vanessa left, a young cashier approached Ethan, her face a mix of sympathy and admiration. "How do you stay so calm with people like that?" she asked. Ethan offered a small smile. "It's not about them," he said simply. "It's about doing the job the right way." Nearby customers murmured their support, some shooting lingering glances toward the door where Vanessa had exited. Ethan's quiet strength had turned an uncomfortable moment into a silent reminder of dignity and professionalism. Unknown to Vanessa, Ethan wasn't just a cashier. He was the owner of the store, a self-made man who had built the business from the ground up after years of overcoming personal and professional challenges. His role behind the register wasn't out of necessity but choice, a way to stay connected to the people and community that had supported him. Ethan glanced at the door where Vanessa had disappeared, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. He had dealt with people like her before, and he knew the best response wasn't anger but action. Little did Vanessa know, her encounter with Ethan was far from over. Vanessa Sterling's mocking tone cut through the air like a knife, loud enough to draw the attention of nearby shoppers. "Seriously," she sneered, tapping her manicured nails on the counter, "how do they expect someone like you to keep up? You're holding up the line." Ethan Blake, the cashier, met her gaze with calm professionalism, though the slight clenching of his jaw betrayed the sting of her words. He continued scanning her items with precision, his prosthetic leg visible as he shifted his weight. It was a subtle but visible reminder of the struggles he'd faced and overcome. "Your patience is appreciated." "Ma'am," Ethan said evenly, his voice steady. Vanessa rolled her eyes dramatically. "Patience? You're hilarious. Honestly, I can't believe they put you out here in front. Shouldn't you be in the back stocking shelves or something? Less complicated work." A hush fell over the surrounding area. Shoppers glanced over their shoulders, their expressions shifting from curiosity to disbelief as Vanessa's insults grew louder. A young mother, standing a few feet away, placed her hand protectively on her child's shoulder, whispering something as her gaze flickered between Ethan and Vanessa. One of the store employees, a petite woman named Rachel, emerged from the nearby aisle, her brows furrowed as she approached the counter. She paused, unsure whether to intervene, her eyes darting between Vanessa's haughty expression and Ethan's calm demeanor. "Is everything okay here?" Rachel asked cautiously. "Oh, everything's fine," Vanessa said with a sharp laugh, waving Rachel off. "I'm just amazed at how slow this guy is. It's like watching a snail try to run a marathon." Ethan raised his head and looked at Rachel with a small nod, silently assuring her that he had the situation under control. Rachel hesitated but eventually stepped back, her concern evident as she lingered nearby. Despite the humiliation, Ethan refused to let Vanessa's words rattle him. He focused on his work, his movements methodical and precise as he bagged her items. His expression remained neutral, but there was a quiet determination in his eyes, a resolve not to stoop to her level. "Your total is $87.50, Ethan said, handing Vanessa the receipt with a steady hand. Vanessa scoffed. "Finally. You know, if you worked half as hard as you look like you're trying, you might actually be decent at this job." Ethan allowed himself a brief pause, just long enough to meet her gaze. "Thank you for your feedback, Mahim," he said politely. His response, devoid of sarcasm or defensiveness, only seemed to irritate her further. "Feedback? Oh, honey, I don't think you're in any position to take feedback. You're lucky they even gave you this job." The tension in the room thickened, the growing discomfort among the onlookers palpable. As Vanessa continued her tirade, Ethan remained composed, his quiet strength a stark contrast to her escalating behavior. What Vanessa failed to notice, however, was the way the other employees subtly deferred to Ethan. A tall, well-dressed man in his late 50s stepped out of the manager's office, his sharp eyes scanning the floor. Spotting Ethan, he gave a slight nod of acknowledgement. "Ethan, can you stop by my office later? I need your input on next quarter's inventory strategy." "Of course, Mark," Ethan replied, his tone professional and confident. Vanessa barely registered the exchange, too wrapped up in her own performance to notice the respect with which Mark spoke to Ethan. Another hint came when an older woman approached Ethan's register. "Ethan, dear, I just wanted to thank you for the job fair last week. My grandson got a position in the warehouse because of you." Ethan smiled warmly. "I'm glad to hear that, Mrs. Carter. He's a great addition to the team." Vanessa snorted. "Wow, now you're running job fairs. Should I be impressed?" Ethan didn't respond to her jab, but the quiet respect from his colleagues and customers painted a very different picture than Vanessa's assumptions. The scene continued to draw attention. A middle-aged man whispered to his wife, shaking his head in disapproval. A teenage girl standing nearby muttered, "What's her problem?" loud enough for her mother to shush her. Despite the building tension, Vanessa seemed oblivious to how the room had turned against her. She basked in her imagined superiority, mistaking the silence for compliance rather than discomfort. Ethan's silence, however, wasn't submission, it was strategy. Years of dealing with people like Vanessa had taught him that dignity and professionalism were the best responses to prejudice and ignorance. As Vanessa gathered her bags, she turned back one last time, her smirk firmly in place. "Well, good luck, champ. You'll need it." Ethan offered her a polite nod. "Thank you, Ma, I am. Have a great day." The interaction might have ended there if not for a voice from the crowd. "You've got a lot of nerve." Vanessa spun around, her smirk faltering as the young mother who had been watching stepped forward. "Excuse me," Vanessa snapped. The woman crossed her arms. "You heard me. Treating someone like that, someone who's doing their job with more grace and professionalism than you'll ever have, is disgusting." Vanessa's face reddened, but before she could respond, a few others murmured their agreement. Ethan raised a hand gently. "It's all right," he said softly. "I appreciate your support, but there's no need to escalate." His words diffused the situation, further showcasing his ability to handle adversity with dignity. Vanessa stormed toward the exit, her heels clicking furiously against the tile. "This place is a joke," she muttered under her breath. As she disappeared through the sliding glass doors, the tension in the room eased. Rachel approached Ethan again, her expression filled with admiration. "I don't know how you do it," she said. Ethan chuckled softly. "You learn to pick your battles. People like her, they don't define us." The audience had seen only part of the story. What they didn't yet know was that Ethan wasn't just an employee, he was the owner of the entire store. Mark, the manager, walked over and clapped Ethan on the shoulder. "You handled that beautifully as always." Ethan smiled faintly, glancing toward the door where Vanessa had exited. Some lessons are best learned the hard way. Vanessa Sterling stormed back into the store, her face flushed with irritation. Something about the encounter with the slow cashier continued to gnaw at her, and she was determined to escalate the matter. She headed straight for the customer service desk, heels clicking sharply against the tile floor. A junior associate behind the counter looked up nervously as Vanessa approached. "How can I help you, ma'am?" "I want to speak to a manager," Vanessa demanded, her tone clipped. "Actually, scratch that. I want to speak to whoever's in charge of hiring around here. That man at Register 3 is a joke, and this store should be ashamed for letting someone like him represent your business." The associate stammered, Let me get someone for you." Within moments, Mark, the store manager, appeared. He was a tall, composed man in his late 50s, with a calm demeanor that immediately suggested authority. "Good afternoon," he said warmly. "I'm Mark, the store manager. How can I assist you?" Vanessa wasted no time launching into her complaint. "Your cashier, what's his name, Ethan, was completely unprofessional. He's slow, unfit for the job, and frankly an embarrassment to your store. I don't know what standards you have here, but someone like him shouldn't be working in the front. It's bad for business." Mark's expression didn't waver, though there was a slight narrowing of his eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that you're dissatisfied with your experience," he said evenly. "Ethan is one of our most dedicated employees." Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Dedicated? Maybe to slowing down the line. Look, I'm just trying to help you out here. You need people who can actually keep up." Mark paused, then glanced over Vanessa's shoulder. "Ethan, can you join us for a moment?" Vanessa turned, frowning as Ethan approached. He walked with the same quiet confidence that had unnerved her earlier, his posture calm and composed. As Ethan joined them, Mark gestured toward him with a small smile. "Ms. Sterling, allow me to introduce Ethan Blake. He's not just one of our employees, he's the owner of this company." The words hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. Vanessa's eyes widened, her confident smirk dissolving into stunned disbelief. "Wait," what she stammered. Ethan extended a hand toward Vanessa, his expression calm but firm. "Ethan Blake," he said, "founder and owner of Blake's Markets." Vanessa hesitated, staring at his outstretched hand as if it were a trick. Slowly she shook it, her grip weak and uncertain. I didn't realize." "I gathered as much," Ethan said evenly, withdrawing his hand. His tone wasn't angry, it was composed, almost serene. Vanessa's face flushed a deep red as she looked between Ethan and Mark. I thought you were just," she trailed off, her words faltering. "Just a cashier," Ethan finished for her, his voice steady. Vanessa swallowed hard. I didn't know." Ethan met her gaze with quiet intensity. You didn't ask. You made assumptions and treated me based on what you thought you saw. That's the issue, Ms. Sterling. Vanessa opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. The confidence she'd worn like armor earlier had crumbled, leaving her exposed and fumbling for an explanation. Ethan's tone softened slightly, but his words carried weight. I've spent years building this company. I've worked in every position from stocking shelves to running the register, because I believe that leadership comes from understanding every part of the business. He gestured toward the employees bustling around the store. The people who work here aren't just staff. They're the backbone of this company. And I won't tolerate anyone, customer or otherwise, treating them with disrespect. Vanessa's embarrassment deepened, and she looked down, avoiding Ethan's gaze. I didn't mean to offend you, she mumbled. I'm not looking for an apology for myself, Ethan said. What matters is that you think about how you treat people whether they own the company or not. As Ethan spoke, a small crowd of shoppers and employees had gathered nearby, drawn by the tension of the moment. Whispers spread through the group as people began piecing together what was happening. A young mother who had witnessed Vanessa's earlier tirade leaned toward her husband, whispering, "Serves her right." Another shopper muttered, "Can't believe she's still standing there after that." The weight of the crowd's judgment settled over Vanessa like a heavy blanket. She glanced around, her face a mix of shame and frustration. "I didn't mean to cause trouble," she said weakly. "You caused it the moment you decided to demean someone without knowing who they were," Ethan replied. His words weren't harsh, but they left no room for argument. Vanessa shifted her bag on her shoulder, avoiding the stares of the crowd. "Well, I guess I'll be going now," she said awkwardly. Mark stepped aside, giving her a clear path to the exit. "Have a good day, Ms. Sterling," he said, his tone neutral but firm. As Vanessa hurried out of the store, the automatic doors sliding shut behind her, the tension in the room began to dissipate. A few customers clapped softly, while others murmured their approval. Ethan turned back to Mark, giving him a small nod. "Thanks for stepping in, Mark. You handled it perfectly." "As always," Mark replied with a faint smile. Rachel, the young cashier who had been watching from a distance, approached with wide eyes. "I had no idea she didn't know who you were," she said. Ethan chuckled lightly. "That's the thing about people like her, they only see what they want to see." Rachel nodded, her admiration evident. "You're an incredible leader, Ethan." As the crowd began to disperse, Ethan returned to his station, calmly picking up where he left off. He had no need to dwell on the encounter. He had faced prejudice and ignorance before, and he would likely face it again. For him, the moment wasn't about proving a point, it was about holding firm to his values. His quiet dignity and steadfast professionalism had turned what could have been a humiliating moment into a powerful lesson. The automatic doors of the store slid shut behind Vanessa Sterling, but she stood frozen on the sidewalk, her confidence shattered and her mind racing. The weight of what had just transpired pressed down on her, each moment replaying vividly in her mind. Ethan's calm but pointed words lingered like an echo, forcing her to confront the full impact of her behavior. She clutched her designer handbag tightly, her fingers trembling. "I didn't mean it like that, did I?" The thought felt hollow, even to her. For the first time, Vanessa wasn't sure how to justify her actions. Vanessa turned back toward the glass doors, hesitant but compelled. Swallowing her pride, she stepped inside. The once bustling store seemed quieter now, as if the tension from the earlier confrontation still lingered. Shoppers cast her subtle glances, their expressions a mix of curiosity and disapproval. Ethan was at the register, assisting another customer with the same quiet professionalism he had displayed throughout the ordeal. Vanessa approached cautiously, her usually confident stride replaced with tentative steps. "Excuse me," she began, her voice softer than anyone had heard it that day. Ethan looked up, his gaze steady but unreadable. "Yes, ma'am," he asked, his tone polite but neutral. Vanessa shifted awkwardly, her usual poise crumbling under the weight of her own embarrassment. I just wanted to say I'm sorry. I didn't realize who you were, and I." Ethan raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "You don't need to apologize for not knowing who I am," he said evenly. "You need to think about how you treat people, regardless of who they are." Vanessa opened her mouth to respond but found herself at a loss for words. "I didn't mean to offend you," she mumbled, her voice barely audible. "I was just having a bad day, and I." "Everyone has bad days," Ethan said, his calm demeanor unshaken. "But that doesn't give us the right to take it out on others." Ethan straightened slightly, his posture embodying both strength and humility. What you said to me earlier, he began, his tone steady but firm, is something I've heard countless times before. People assume things about me because of how I look or the challenges I face. They think they know my story before they've even spoken to me. And most of the time, they don't bother to find out if their assumptions are true. Vanessa looked down, unable to meet his gaze. The weight of his words pressed into her like a truth she could no longer avoid. "I faced a lot of challenges in my life," Ethan continued. "Losing my leg was one of them. But I chose not to let that define me. I worked hard, I built this business from the ground up, and I'm proud of what we've accomplished here. Not because I want recognition, but because I believe in treating people with respect, no matter where they come from or what they look like." He paused, letting his words settle in the air. The silence was filled with the quiet murmurs of nearby shoppers, their attention drawn to the conversation. Rachel, the young cashier who had watched the earlier exchange, stepped forward. "Ethan, you've always been an inspiration to all of us," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "You treat everyone here like family, and we see the way you stand up for what's right. People like her don't define you." A murmur of agreement rippled through the small crowd that had gathered. Shoppers nodded in silent support, their expressions ranging from admiration to quiet disapproval directed at Vanessa. An older woman who had been shopping nearby chimed in. "You handled yourself with so much grace," she said to Ethan. "More than most people would have." Vanessa's face burned as the subtle weight of public opinion pressed down on her. She fidgeted with the strap of her handbag, feeling exposed and out of place. Ethan looked around at the gathered crowd, his calm gaze sweeping over the faces of his employees and customers. "Thank you," he said softly, addressing the group. "But this isn't about me. It's about how we treat each other every day, in every interaction." He turned back to Vanessa, his tone softening slightly. "I know it's easy to make assumptions. We all do it, whether we realize it or not. But it's important to stop and think about the impact our words and actions have on others. Because respect isn't just something we give to people in positions of power, it's something we owe to everyone." For a moment, Ethan's mind wandered to his own journey. He thought about the countless times he'd been underestimated, dismissed, or judged because of his disability. Each moment had been a battle, but it had also been a lesson, a reminder that resilience and kindness could overcome even the most deeply ingrained prejudices. He took a breath, grounding himself in the present. "I've learned that the best way to break stereotypes is to live in a way that challenges them," he said. "Not through anger or resentment, but through determination and compassion." Vanessa nodded slowly, her usual sharpness dulled by the weight of her own shame. I'll think about what you said," she murmured. "I hope you do," Ethan replied, his tone sincere but firm. "Because the way we treat people matters. It's what defines us." Without another word, Vanessa turned and walked toward the exit. Her stride was slower this time, her heels clicking softly against the tile as the automatic doors slid open and closed behind her. As the store returned to its normal rhythm, Ethan stood for a moment, reflecting on the events of the day. The encounter with Vanessa had been uncomfortable, but it wasn't unusual. He had faced prejudice before, and he knew he would face it again. But for Ethan, every moment like this was an opportunity, a chance to show that kindness, resilience, and quiet strength could challenge even the most deeply held assumptions. Rachel approached him again, her voice filled with admiration. "You always know how to handle situations like that," she said. Ethan smiled faintly. "It's not about handling it," he replied. "It's about setting an example. If we can show people what respect and empathy look like, maybe they'll start to see the world a little differently." Vanessa Sterling sat in her car in the store's parking lot, the engine idling as she stared blankly out the windshield. The events of the past hour replayed in her mind with painful clarity. She clenched the steering wheel tightly, her cheeks still warm with the embarrassment of Ethan Blake's calm but piercing words. For years, Vanessa had seen herself as someone who told it like it was. She prided herself on her sharp wit and her ability to cut through what she often dismissed as unnecessary politeness. But today, that sharpness had turned into a mirror, forcing her to confront the truth about herself. Vanessa's self-image began to crack under the weight of introspection. She'd mocked Ethan because of his prosthetic leg, made him the target of her frustration and assumptions. It hadn't even occurred to her to wonder about his story or what he'd overcome to be where he was. She thought back to Ethan's words, "The way we treat people matters. It's what defines us." The truth stung. Vanessa had always believed she was better than others, deserving of special treatment because of her wealth and status. But now, she realized how small that mindset had made her. Her phone buzzed on the seat beside her, interrupting her thoughts. It was a message from a friend, inviting her to a dinner party. Normally, Vanessa would have welcomed the distraction, but instead, she found herself opening her browser and typing Ethan Blake into the search bar. The results were immediate. Articles popped up about Blake's Markets and their founder. Vanessa's eyes scanned the headlines. Local entrepreneur Ethan Blake triumphs over adversity to build a thriving business from struggles to success. The story of Ethan Blake. Intrigued, Vanessa clicked on one of the articles. As she read, her understanding of Ethan deepened. She learned about the accident that had cost him his leg, a drunk driver running a red light, and the years of recovery and therapy that followed. Ethan had faced discrimination and setbacks but had refused to let them define him. Instead, he had poured his energy into creating a business that valued community, inclusion, and opportunity. Vanessa's stomach tightened as she read about Ethan's initiatives, including hiring programs for people with disabilities and mentoring local youth. She thought of her earlier behavior and felt a fresh wave of guilt. She had dismissed Ethan as just a cashier, yet he had built something far greater than she could have imagined. The weight of her realization settled over Vanessa like a heavy blanket. She'd spent so much of her life focused on appearances and material success that she'd never stopped to consider the value of character or kindness. Ethan had every reason to lash out at her, yet he'd remained calm and composed, turning her insults into a lesson she desperately needed. Vanessa glanced back toward the store, her fingers hovering over the door handle. For a brief moment, she considered going back inside to offer a heartfelt apology, but she hesitated. Would it even matter now? Could she undo the harm she'd caused with a simple "I'm sorry"? Instead, she took a deep breath, resolving to do better, not just for Ethan, but for herself and the people she encountered every day. Inside the store, Ethan sat with Mark in the small break room. The conversation about Vanessa's behavior had passed, and now the focus had shifted to how Ethan's leadership could shape the future of the store. "That was quite a performance out there," Mark said with a wry smile. "You handled it better than most people would have." Ethan shrugged, his expression thoughtful. "It's not about handling it. It's about setting an example. If I let people like her get to me, what kind of message does that send to my team?" Mark nodded, leaning back in his chair. "Your team looks up to you, Ethan. You've built something incredible here. And moments like that only reinforce why they respect you." Ethan smiled faintly, but his mind was already turning. He thought about Rachel, the young cashier who had stepped in to support him, and the other employees who had watched the confrontation unfold. Moments like these weren't just personal, they were teachable opportunities to reinforce the values he'd built the business on. Later that afternoon, Ethan gathered the store employees in the break room for a brief meeting. The atmosphere was light but attentive as the team settled in, curious about what he had to say. "I want to thank you all for how you handled things today," Ethan began, his voice calm but commanding. "Situations like that aren't easy, but the way we respond to them says a lot about who we are, not just as individuals but as a team." He glanced around the room, meeting the eyes of each employee. "We've built something special here," he continued. "This store isn't just about selling products. It's about creating a space where everyone feels respected and valued, whether they're a customer or a member of our team." Rachel raised her hand, her voice hesitant but sincere. "Ethan, can I just say, the way you handled that woman today, it inspired me. You stayed calm, even when she didn't deserve it." Ethan nodded, his expression warm. "Thank you, Rachel. But it's not about whether someone deserves kindness. It's about showing them what kindness looks like. Sometimes, the best way to challenge prejudice is to lead by example." Ethan spent the next few minutes outlining new initiatives to reinforce the store's values of inclusion and respect. He proposed hosting workshops on diversity and empathy, inviting both employees and community members to participate. "This isn't just about one incident," Ethan said. "It's about making sure everyone who walks through those doors understands what we stand for. We're here to serve, yes, but we're also here to inspire. And that starts with how we treat each other." The employees nodded in agreement, their admiration for Ethan growing with every word. After the meeting, Ethan returned to his office and sat down at his desk. He allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection, thinking about the journey that had brought him here. There had been so many moments when he'd been underestimated, dismissed, or judged because of his disability. But each of those moments had fueled his determination to prove not only his own worth, but the worth of others who faced similar challenges. For Ethan, leadership wasn't just about running a business, it was about creating opportunities, breaking down barriers, and showing that success could be built on a foundation of empathy and respect. As he looked out the window at the bustling store below, Ethan felt a quiet sense of pride. The confrontation with Vanessa hadn't been easy, but it had been a reminder of why he built Blake's Markets in the first place. Because in the end, the way we treat people truly does matter. Vanessa Sterling parked her car in the same spot outside Blake's Markets where her humiliation had unfolded days earlier. Clutched in her hand was a small, carefully wrapped box. She stared at the store's familiar facade, her pulse quickening with every passing second. She had spent days grappling with the fallout of her actions, replaying her cruel words and Ethan's calm but impactful response. Today, she was here to take the first step toward making amends. Inside the store, Ethan stood at the customer service desk, reviewing paperwork. He looked up as Vanessa approached, her posture tentative but determined. "Mr. Blake," Vanessa began, her voice softer and more sincere than he had ever heard it. "I wanted to come back and apologize. Properly this time." Ethan's expression remained calm, though his curiosity was evident. "I see. I appreciate you taking the time to come back." Vanessa placed the box on the counter and pushed it toward him. "This is for you. It's not much, but I wanted to say thank you for the lesson you gave me, even if I didn't deserve it." Ethan opened the box carefully, revealing a sleek, engraved pen. The inscription read, "For those who lead by example." He ran his fingers over the words, a small smile breaking through his otherwise composed demeanor. "This is thoughtful." "Thank you," he said simply. Vanessa exhaled, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly. "I also made a donation to your community programs. It's the least I could do after the way I acted." As Vanessa stood there, uncertain of what to say next, Ethan set the pen aside and folded his hands on the counter. "Ms. Sterling, I appreciate your effort to make things right. But what matters most isn't the gift or the donation. It's that you've taken the time to reflect and grow. That's what really counts." His words were calm but firm, carrying the wisdom of someone who had spent years navigating challenges with grace. Ethan glanced toward the bustling store, his employees moving seamlessly between aisles, assisting customers with smiles and patience. "This business wasn't just built on hard work," he continued. "It was built on perseverance. Every challenge I've faced, every moment of doubt has taught me something valuable. And those lessons have shaped not just me, but the culture of this store." Vanessa nodded, her expression earnest. "I see that now. You've created something amazing here, something I didn't take the time to understand before." Ethan offered her a small nod. Understanding is the first step toward change. And change is something we all need to embrace. As Vanessa left the store, a sense of relief and clarity washed over her. She had taken the first step toward redemption, but she knew her journey was far from over. This wasn't just about apologizing to Ethan, it was about changing the way she treated people, the way she saw the world. Back inside, Ethan watched her leave, then turned his attention back to the store. A young boy with a prosthetic leg walked in with his mother, his face lighting up as he spotted Ethan. "Mr. Blake," the boy exclaimed, waving enthusiastically. Ethan crouched down to meet him at eye level. "Hey buddy, how's the new soccer league going?" "It's awesome. Thanks for helping me sign up," the boy beamed. Ethan ruffled the boy's hair with a chuckle. "I'm glad to hear it. Keep at it. All right." The mother gave Ethan a grateful smile as they moved toward the produce section. Moments like this reminded him why he had built Blake's Markets in the first place. The day ended as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the store. Ethan stood by the large glass windows, watching the last few customers leave. Rachel approached, holding a clipboard. "Another busy day," she said with a smile. Ethan nodded. "Busy, but fulfilling." Rachel hesitated before adding, "That woman who came back earlier, Vanessa. Do you think she really changed?" Ethan considered her question thoughtfully. "Change doesn't happen overnight," he said. "But every step forward matters. If she's willing to take those steps, then she deserves a second chance just like anyone else." Rachel smiled at his words, inspired by his quiet optimism. As the lights in the store dimmed for the evening, Ethan reflected on the day's events. Vanessa's return was a reminder that even the most difficult encounters could lead to something meaningful. Life was full of challenges, but it was also full of opportunities to grow, to learn, and to make things right. And for Ethan, there was no greater reward than witnessing those moments of change, both in himself and in others.